when you look at the conditions for changes for Russian imperialism, do you see any potential within the political, cultural, institutional lens? What would it take to change not only Kremlin's mindset, but also broader Russian political elite's mindset that it is not worth the cost to continue to be a revanchist power?
All right, thank you. The short answer to your question is very simple. The only thing that can change Kremlin mindset is military defeat of Kremlin. Nothing else. So meaning no ceasefire, no truce, no peace treaty, no negotiations of any kind, no sanctions, regardless how hellish you would call them. None of that can stop Kremlin from pursuing Russian imperialist policy. And what is good in this conference, yesterday and today, that it, for the first time for these 3+ years, it's shifting to the right direction. This is not about Ukraine. It's not about war in Ukraine. It is not about Ukrainian war, as it is used to be in the US and in many capitals around the world. It is about, as well as not about Georgia, Moldova, Chechnya, Syria, Baltic countries. No, it is about Russian imperialism. And it should be clearly as possible. And this is a war, it is not even correctly called, not a Russian-Ukrainian war that I would prefer before. This is war against Russian imperialism. And it must be called as it is, used as this title. This is a war, I would say global war against Russian imperialism. And now, since we identify the problem more or less correctly, and I hear recurring topics over these last 2 days, it must be absolutely clear what is Russian imperialism. It is particular mindset, philosophy, political philosophy, policy, ideology. Not of one person, but of millions of people. Fortunately, not all Russian people, but many of Russian people, by millions. And that particular mindset cannot be stopped and cannot be defeated at the negotiation table. The only way to deal with such a monster, as we learn from history, not only with Russian imperialism, but with some other imperialism, is military defeat. Nothing else. Third, this imperialism is being supported by pretty resilient Russian economy. Those who expect and waiting that Russian economy collapse very time soon, unfortunately wrong. I had some relations to build that economy, and I can assure you, it will last effectively for years or maybe even decades to come, that they will be able to produce resources to wage the war against the rest of the world. So that is why the very approach to the Russian economy and to the Russian imperialism must be different. Fourth, we need to formulate as clearly as possible and as publicly as possible strategy to defeat the Russian imperialism. Not Russia, but Russian imperialism. And the goal must be formulated very clearly. Russian imperialism must be defeated. There are many myths spread right now, not only from Kremlin, but from White House and from other places, that about the so-called Russian imperialism invincibility. Means they defeated Hitler, they defeated Napoleon, it's impossible to defeat them. It's myth, it's wrong. Out of 84 wars that Russia waged over the last 3 centuries, in 1/3 of those wars, most of them imperialistics. So Russia has been defeated in 1/3 of those wars. It means it's possible. It is not easy, but it's possible. And that is why the only topic that we need to discuss, how to do it, how to repeat this success. And here we have two approaches. One is deterrence, containment, a la George Kennan of Long Telegram, 1946. It took 45 years to achieve results, but it is not applicable in the current situation because back then it was Cold War. Now we are in hot war, in real war, in active war. Containment and deterrence is good to prevent the beginning of the war. If we're already in the war, any containment could not stop rolling tanks, flying drones or missiles, and bombing civilians. It's impossible. There is only one way to stop it: military defeat. There is no other way. So, 6th point. In this war, long war, war of attrition, there are two most important features. First one, it is really might be a very long war. It might last years and decades. And we need to understand that the war will not finish next week at the negotiations table in Vatican, Istanbul, or any other place. It might last decades. We need to be prepared to that. And second, the most important element of war of attrition, it is war of resources. It is war of potentials. First of all, military potentials. There are many ways to calculate this. The basic equation is a military expenditure. But military expenditure, not what has been spent or what is being spent or is going to be spent in so-called countries that are not participating in the war, even they are members of NATO alliance. The crucial equation, how much resources is being used in these particular military operations. Right now, this is a Russian-Ukrainian theater, Russian-Ukrainian war theater. And here the very clear equation. Just I put aside all this preparation, the final number. Russia this year is going to spend 500 billion US dollars based on purchasing power parity. 200 billion US dollars by exchange rate and about 500 billion by PPP. Ukraine is going to spend about 150 billion US dollars by PPP. European allies are going to provide, and maybe some other allies, not more than 20 billion US dollars. So that is why we're having this ratio, 500 on Russian side, and in the very best case, 170 on the Ukrainian and allies and friends side. The ratio is 3-to-1. There is no war of attrition can be won with such a ratio of potentials, of military expenditures. Forget about this. That is why we understand that Ukraine cannot increase military expenditure substantially, even with all their efforts. It means the contribution of our friends and allies must be in not tens of billions, but in hundreds of billions of military resources provided to Ukrainian front. My last point. What is the real instrument, channel for victory, for defeat? It has been provided by history, by many historical lessons. It's a combination of resources, of unification of resources, gathering allies together who are participating in that war. Best example, Stefan Batory in Livonian War, who was able to collect Poles, Lithuanians, Latvians who were Belarusians, Ukrainians, Cossacks, Hungarians, Germans, Swedes, all together. All together, they were able to destroy Ivan the Terrible troops. Later, Jan Sobieski arrived to Vienna in 1683 to unite forces, combine forces, to defeat the common enemy. Later, Joseph Pilsudski proposed intermarium, Medjimorje, the idea of collecting, of uniting resources to build a deterrence and to prepare defeat of imperialism. There is no other way to deal with such a monster. And the title, short title for this strategy, based on what we have discussed yesterday about the Western value in the international area, may I offer this idea in a short term: за вашу и нашу вольность, for our and your liberty, за нашу и вашу свободу. That's a way how to deal and how to defeat Russian imperialism.
Thank you very much, Andrei. Andrei, the same question to you, but also you very rightly pointed out that this is a war of attrition. It can last quite a bit, and historically that has been the case. Wars either last very short, or they tend to, if they go over a year, they tend to go up to 10 years. Do we have in the West the stamina and the necessary mindset to be able to sustain this effort? And short of marching to Kremlin, are there any other ways in which we can try to make change within Russia that can actually have a meaningful impact? How deep the imperialist mindset goes, and what sort of hardships, then in other words, the Russian people need to go through to change their mind short of complete military defeat?
The answer to your first question is very clear. You can ask the same question to Ukrainians. Back then in 2014 or year 2022, and would you find anyone in Ukraine who wanted to fight Russia? I did not find anyone. Nobody wanted. Nobody wanted war. But when war was imposed, Ukrainians were forced to fight. And if you remember, in the spring of 2022, everybody was like, oh, it's 2 more weeks, or 3 more weeks, or 2 more months. So what do we see now? 3+ years. And they're fighting, and they will be fighting, because the choice is very simple. Either they're fighting, or they will be dead. If Russia stops fighting, it will be peace. If Ukraine will stop fighting, Ukraine will be dead. That's very clear. Same story with Europe. Europe must to understand, if Europe will be looking for some possible solutions, it will be dead. Sometimes figuratively, sometimes not, especially for Baltics. It's quite clear. So that is why it's a choice. It's a choice that's not the choice that Europe would like to take easily. Nobody would like to take it easily, but there is no other way. 3 more points concerning these discussions about the dismantling of Russian imperialism, as Jerzy has mentioned, 1917. That attempt led to rebirth of Polish statehood, by the way, and birth of Finnish statehood, Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian, and for 3 years, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia. So that is why it's helpful. Maybe not ideal, but helpful. Right. Okay, so that is why we're looking for realistic scenarios. Okay, so that's why speaking about realistic scenarios. Are we talking about the parade of Ukrainian troops on the Red Square in Moscow? Maybe not tomorrow, okay? So what are realistic scenarios? Let me use another example from the Polish history. Soviet-Polish War of 1919-1921. There was miracle on Vistula and the defeat of Budyonna near Lviv that led to Riga Treaty. So that is why it was possible. It was possible by Polish troops to defeat Red Army. That's a fact of life in front of our eyes. In summer 1944, Finnish troops inflicted 6 defeats to the Soviet army. By that time, maybe one of the most powerful, maybe the most powerful army in the Second World War, in summer 1944. Nevertheless, so Finnish did it. And after that, Stalin decided, okay, it is too pricey to go to Helsinki. It is too expensive. And that is why I need to abandon the goal of occupation and annexation of Finland. So, it is possible. Afghans, during this 9-year Afghan war. So it was very heavy price being paid by Afghans But nevertheless, Soviet troops have been evacuated from Afghanistan. And it's not even from European theater, it's from the Central Asian theater of military action, so it is possible. So that is why we need to understand and to formulate and adjust and implement this strategy of military defeat. And my last point would be my strong suggestion to everybody to differentiate between Russia and Russian imperialism. Because we need, it's first of all from military point of view, from effective point of view, from political point of view, but also from the point of view of having one more ally that has not been mentioned yet, some Russian people. I would not say everybody, but there are many Russian people who hate Russian imperialism and who wanted to destroy Russian imperialism even more than anybody sitting in this hall. So that is why, if the goal is to destroy or to defeat Russia, it means this ally would not join ranks. If the goal to defeat Russian imperialism, so our combined army of freedom would have very important ally in Russia.
Thank you. My name is Maria Piechowska. I'm from PISM. It was a very interesting discussion. Thank you for that. And when I hear such a discussion, I have a feeling it's really, I'm sorry, theoretic. Because we can talk for a long time about how to defeat Russia and how to actually defeat Russian imperialism, because it's a war not only against military power such as Russia, but the even more dangerous thing, but ideology. But let's now go down a little bit to practical things. I strongly believe that making Russia understand that it's not okay to be like Russia is right now, it would be the question of Crimea. I mean, we forgot a little bit about Crimea. Right now we have some signals that from US administration that Crimea may be given to Russia even. So, and I strongly believe that but if Crimea could go back to Russia, to Ukraine, it would be a very strong symbol of fighting this imperialism, Russian imperialism. So how to, and this is my question, how to return to the international debate the question of Crimea? How can we defeat this situation right now that US, for example, is supporting somehow Russia in this Crimea question?
Excellent.
Elżbieta Kaca, PISM expert working on sanctions. I have a question to Mr. Illarionov. How do you evaluate the impact of sanctions, Western sanctions, on Russian economy? And what else we might do as a West to squeeze Russian economy and to counter the evasion tactics used by Russia, because you most probably are the best expert to tell us that.
Excellent. And we have one more right behind. Yep.
Thank you very much. Irina Krasnoshtan, International Center for Ukrainian Victory. I wanted to follow up on this debate because I think the panel agrees on the need for Russian defeat, but if you go outside of these halls, I think the problem will be that not everyone identifies this as the goal. And the problem is that some see that weakening of Russia is the goal, but not its defeat. So how do we tackle that? And to build up on the point of Mr. Illarionov about this being a global, war against Russian imperialism, I would again argue that a lot of people will not agree with that. And how do we pass this psychological point? I totally agree, but how do we pass this psychological point of a lot of our even friends who look at Ukrainian war as something aside? Yes, we need to support, but they don't see it as the common war as you described. So how do we pass this psychologically?
Let me get one more and then turn, because we have about 9 minutes to go. Sir in the back, yes, go ahead.
Hi, Tomasz Lukaszuk, University of Warsaw. Yeah, I would like to ask Mr. Pomianowski about, the coalition of the like-minded countries, beyond Europe. Shall we find someone like Russia found China, so maybe we could find Japan and South Korea, maybe other like-minded countries? Thank you.
And the first question concerning sanctions, 3 points. Impact of sanctions on Russian economy was very, very limited. We need to understand it. Second, what can be done? I suggested even back in March 2022, a very different approach to sanctions, to introduce so-called smart sanctions. What does it mean? It means not limiting Russian export. It means imposing tax rate on Russian export of energy resources, first of all oil, let's say at level 50%, to put them at escrow accounts and to redirect to Ukraine for Ukraine aims goals. So that is why world needs energy. It is very hard to stop flow of energy, but it is possible to redirect money flows arising from these energy flows and to redirect it to Ukraine. Instead of fighting for these frozen Russian assets, endless war, judicial and so on, you can use each dollar that is can go to Russia instead of that, half of that dollar going to Ukraine to support Ukrainian military and economic efforts. So that is why to force Russian imperialism to work for its own destruction. So last point here, sanctions alone, regardless what kind of sanctions, cannot defeat imperialism, even with those smart sanctions. Nevertheless, you always need additional military means. As for global war is being waged, and we see it, sometimes visible, sometimes not very visible. Ukrainian GUR is fighting in Sahel against Russian Wagner. Ukrainian GUR is fighting in Syria against Russian troops. It's a global, it's not only one theater. I would not mention some other theaters. Those who involved, they know. So that is why what can we do? This is a psychological war, and in psychological war, it is necessary to have a psychological means. So that is why the most important one is information and counter disinformation measures. Just to explain that if retail store has been burned in Warsaw, it has been burned not by itself. It was somebody who came from the east to do it. Or if there's some kind of ammunition stores in Czech Republic have been exploded, it is not by itself. Or somebody in Bulgaria has been shot or poisoned, or in Germany, or in England, or many other places. It is constant, permanent work to explain why all this happened. And this happened not only on the Russian-Ukrainian front, it happens in Europe, in European countries that pretend they do not participate in this war, while Europe was sleeping. Seems to me that was the title of a famous book from the Second World War.